In the farthest reaches of known space, where three galactic civilizations meet at the edge of nowhere, stands a saloon that has witnessed more impossible stories than any database could record. Here, in this dusty outpost on the desert world of Kepler's End, legends are born from the most unlikely encounters. Today, a weathered human veteran sits alone at the bar, nursing his drink and trying to forget a war that cost him everything. He doesn't know that in the next few minutes, a conversation with a mysterious alien dragon will not only change his life forever, but alter the balance of power across the entire galaxy. What happens when humanity's greatest weakness becomes its most terrifying strength? When a species written off as primitive cattle reveals the true meaning of survival? The answer lies in the words exchanged between two unlikely souls in a place where hope comes to die, and, sometimes, against all odds, finds a way to live again. The twin sons of Kepler's End cast long shadows through the grimy windows of Murphy's Last Stand, the only establishment foolish enough to operate in this forgotten corner of the galaxy. The saloon creaked and groaned under the weight of accumulated dust and broken dreams, its weathered wooden walls telling stories of 1,000 desperate souls who had passed through its doors. The air hung thick with the smell of recycled atmosphere, cheap alcohol, and the metallic tang of desperation that seemed to permeate every frontier outpost. Marcus Sullivan sat hunched over the scarred wooden bar, his calloused fingers wrapped around a glass of synthetic whiskey that burned just enough to remind him he was still alive. The amber liquid caught the dying light filtering through the windows, creating patterns that reminded him of flames dancing in the night. He had been staring into that glass for the better part of an hour, watching the ice cubes melt slowly, each drop that fell seeming to carry away another piece of his soul. The veteran's reflection in the grimy mirror behind the bar showed a man aged far beyond his 43 years. Gray streaked through his dark brown hair, and deep lines etched around his blue eyes spoke of battles fought and friends lost. His left arm, a crude cybernetic replacement, whirred softly as he lifted the glass to his lips. The prosthetic was military-grade but outdated, a constant reminder of the Proxima conflict and the day his unit was overrun by Zephyrian shock troopers. Murphy's Last Stand was the perfect place for a man trying to disappear. The establishment served as neutral ground where species from three different galactic civilizations could drink themselves into oblivion without fear of political complications. The Terran Federation, the Zephyrian Empire, and the Kethvar Collective all maintained an unofficial ceasefire within these walls, though tensions still crackled in the air like static electricity before a storm. The other patrons gave Marcus a wide berth, recognizing the haunted look of a broken soldier. A group of Zephyrian merchants clustered around a table near the back, their chitinous exoskeletons gleaming dully in the low light as they conducted business in their clicking, insectoid language. At the far end of the bar, a Kethvar trader nursed a bowl of fermented algae while reviewing shipping manifests on a holographic display. The ethereal, jellyfish-like being pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that indicated deep concentration. Marcus took another sip of his drink and tried to push away the memories that threatened to surface. The whiskey helped, but never enough. He could still hear the screams of his squad mates, still see the flash of energy weapons cutting through the morning mist on Kepler 442b. Sergeant Kim Rodriguez, barely 19 and fresh out of boot camp. Corporal James Chen, who carried pictures of his 3 daughters in his helmet. Private Maria Santos, who sang old Earth songs during the long watches. All of them gone in a matter of minutes when the Zephyrian ambush caught them in the open. The door to the saloon creaked open, admitting a blast of desert wind that carried the scent of sand and ozone. The conversations in the room died to whispers as the new arrival stepped inside, and Marcus felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up. In his peripheral vision, he caught a glimpse of something that made his blood run cold, yet he forced himself to remain motionless. The creature that entered Murphy's Last Stand defied easy classification. Standing nearly 8 feet tall, it moved with the fluid grace of a predator despite its massive frame. Its body was covered in scales that shifted color from deep purple to midnight black, creating an almost hypnotic pattern that hurt to look at directly. 6 limbs extended from its serpentine torso, the upper 4 ending in hands tipped with razor-sharp claws, while the lower 2 served as powerful legs. Most unsettling of all was its head, which bore an unmistakable resemblance to the dragons of ancient Earth mythology, complete with glowing amber eyes and a mouth filled with teeth designed for rending flesh. The alien's presence filled the room with an almost palpable aura of danger. Even the normally fearless Zephyrians seemed subdued, their antennae twitching nervously as they tried to avoid direct eye contact with the newcomer. The HFY trader's bioluminescent patterns shifted to the deep purple associated with extreme caution among their species. Marcus had seen many strange beings during his military service, but nothing quite like this. The creature wore no insignia or markings that would identify its species or allegiance, yet something about its bearing suggested intelligence far beyond that of a simple beast. The way it moved, the calculated manner in which it surveyed the room, spoke of a mind both ancient and ruthlessly efficient. The dragon-like alien approached the bar with deliberate steps, each footfall creating small vibrations that Marcus could feel through the wooden floor. It selected a spot 3 stools down from the human veteran and settled onto the reinforced furniture with surprising delicacy. The bartender, a grizzled ex-pirate named Murphy O'Shea, approached with obvious reluctance. "What'll it be?" Murphy asked, his Irish accent thick with nervousness. The old man had seen everything in his 40 years of running frontier establishments, but even he seemed shaken by this particular customer. The alien's voice, when it spoke, was like distant thunder rolling across an empty plain. Each word was carefully enunciated, as if the speaker was translating from some other mode of communication. "I require information more than refreshment, barkeeper. But I will purchase your strongest distilled spirit to show proper respect for your establishment." Murphy nodded quickly and reached for a bottle of Centauran firewine, the kind of alcohol that could strip paint and had been known to kill smaller species outright. He poured a generous measure into a reinforced glass and slid it across the bar, keeping his distance from those gleaming claws. The alien lifted the glass with 2 of its upper hands and drained it in a single swallow. If the liquor affected it at all, no sign showed on its reptilian features. "Adequate," it rumbled, then turned its head to study Marcus with those burning amber eyes. For a long moment, neither spoke. Marcus could feel the weight of that ancient gaze, as if the creature was looking not just at him but through him, seeing every secret and every shame he carried. The silence stretched between them like a taut wire, and Marcus became aware that the entire saloon was holding its breath. Finally, the alien spoke again, its voice carrying easily across the now silent room. "You are the one called Marcus Sullivan, formerly Staff Sergeant of the Terran Federation's 3rd Colonial Marines." It wasn't a question, and Marcus felt his stomach drop. He set down his glass with exaggerated care, his cybernetic hand making a soft clicking sound against the wooden bar. "Depends on who's asking," he replied, his voice steady despite the adrenaline now coursing through his veins. The alien's mouth curved in what might have been a smile, revealing rows of teeth that belonged in nightmares. "I am Kozik Th Ran, though your language lacks the proper phonetic structure to pronounce my name correctly. You may call me Kozik. I represent interests that transcend the petty boundaries of your galactic civilizations." Marcus turned on his stool to face the creature directly, a movement that caused several patrons to quietly edge toward the exits. "Kozik, then. What do you want with a washed-up ex-marine drinking himself to death on the ass end of nowhere?" "I want to offer you something that your species has long been denied," Kozik replied, his voice taking on an almost hypnotic quality. "Respect. Recognition. A chance to show the galaxy what humanity is truly capable of." The human veteran laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You're about 10 years too late for that speech, friend. The Federation already showed the galaxy what humans are capable of. We're good at dying for other people's causes and not much else." Kozik's amber eyes seemed to glow brighter, and his scaled head tilted in a gesture that was disturbingly bird-like. "Is that what you believe? That humanity's greatest achievement is its willingness to sacrifice itself for others?" Marcus drained his glass and signaled Murphy for another. The bartender complied quickly, eager to stay busy and avoid attention from the massive alien. "It's what the evidence shows," Marcus said bitterly. "Every major conflict in the last 50 years, humans have been the shock troops, the cannon fodder, the expendable soldiers who hold the line while the superior species handle the important stuff." "The Proxima conflict," Kozik said softly, and Marcus froze. "Where your unit held Hill 347 for 18 hours against overwhelming Zephyrian forces. Where 13 human soldiers prevented an entire battalion from breaking through Federation lines. 12 soldiers and 1 scared kid who should have never been there," Marcus corrected, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "And we didn't prevent anything. We just delayed the inevitable." Kozik leaned forward slightly, bringing his massive frame closer to the human. You delayed it long enough for the evacuation of New Edinburgh to succeed. 17,000 civilians escaped because your scared kid Rodriguez spotted the flanking maneuver, and because you held that hill when any reasonable tactical analysis would have called for immediate withdrawal. Marcus's cybernetic hand clenched involuntarily, servos whining in protest. How do you know about Rodriguez's spot? That information was classified. The alien's smile widened, showing even more of those terrifying teeth. I know because I was there, Marcus Sullivan. Not as a participant, but as an observer. My people have been watching humanity for some time, studying your species with great interest. The saloon seemed to grow colder, and Marcus became acutely aware that he was having this conversation in a public place filled with representatives of 3 different civilizations. Any one of them could be recording this exchange, and the political implications were staggering. Your people, Marcus repeated slowly. And who exactly are your people, Kozik? We are the Draktheri, Kozik replied, and even though Marcus had never heard the name before, something deep in his hindbrain recognized it as significant. We are what you might call the elder race of this galaxy, though we have remained hidden from the younger civilizations until now. Marcus's military training kicked in, his mind automatically cataloging possible threats and escape routes. The front door was 30 feet away but would require moving past the Zephyrian merchants. The back exit was closer but led into an alley with limited options. His sidearm was locked in his room at the boarding house 3 blocks away, a precaution required by Murphy's neutral ground policy. Hidden for how long? Marcus asked, buying time while he processed this information. Kozik's chuckle was like distant thunder. Your species measures time in decades and centuries. We measure it in geological epochs. We have been watching the rise and fall of civilizations in this galaxy since before your sun ignited. The alien paused to order another drink, which Murphy provided with shaking hands. The other patrons had given up any pretense of not listening, and Marcus could see several beings discreetly activating recording devices. But you chose now to reveal yourselves, Marcus said. Why? Because the galaxy stands at a crossroads, Kozik replied, his amber eyes fixing on Marcus with uncomfortable intensity. The 3 great civilizations are moving toward a conflict that will make the Proxima conflict look like a minor border skirmish. Resources are becoming scarce, territory is being contested, and old alliances are crumbling. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the desert wind outside. You're talking about total war. I am talking about extinction, Kozik corrected. The Zephyrian Empire seeks to expand beyond its current borders. The Kethvar Collective believes their superior technology gives them the right to impose order on lesser species. The Terran Federation struggles to maintain relevance while being viewed as the weakest of the 3 powers. The dragon-like alien took another drink before continuing. When this war comes, and it will come within the next 5 standard years, only one species will emerge as the dominant force in the galaxy. The others will be either enslaved or eliminated. Marcus laughed bitterly. And, let me guess, your people want to make sure it's not humanity that gets eliminated. Kozik's expression grew serious, and, for the first time, Marcus glimpsed something that might have been respect in those ancient eyes. My people want to ensure that it is humanity that emerges victorious. The statement hit Marcus like a physical blow. Around the saloon, conversation stopped entirely as beings processed the implications of what they had just heard. A Draktheri, a member of some hidden elder race, was suggesting that humans should inherit the galaxy. You're insane, Marcus whispered. Humans are barely holding our own territory. We've got outdated ships, limited resources, and every other species in the galaxy sees us as primitive barbarians who got lucky with space travel. Kozik's smile returned, and this time it was genuinely amused. Primitive barbarians who have won more battles while outnumbered than any other species in recorded history. Primitive barbarians who show a tactical flexibility and adaptability that confounds military analysts from more advanced civilizations. Primitive barbarians who possess a combination of individual initiative and collective loyalty that no other species has been able to replicate. The alien leaned back on his stool, which creaked ominously under his weight. Tell me, Marcus Sullivan, when your unit was surrounded on Hill 347, what was your first thought? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, lost in memories he had tried desperately to suppress.
That we were all going to die. And, your second thought? That we were going to make them pay for it. Kozik nodded slowly. Not surrender. Not negotiation. Not even retreat.
Your second thought was to inflict maximum damage on your enemies regardless of the cost to yourself.
Do you know what the Zephyrian tactical assessment of that battle concluded?
Marcus shook his head. That 13 humans fought with the ferocity and effectiveness of a force 3 times their number. That despite being completely surrounded and facing certain death, not one human soldier attempted to surrender. The Zephyrians lost 47 soldiers taking that hill, Marcus. 47 elite shock troopers against 13 humans with outdated equipment and no hope of reinforcement. The alien's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but every being in the saloon strained to hear his words. The Zephyrians have a word for what happened on that hill. Roughly translated, it means the madness that conquers reason. It has become their term for human combat behavior. Marcus felt something stir in his chest, an emotion he thought had died with his squad on that distant battlefield. It might have been pride, or perhaps just the faint echo of the man he used to be.
What does any of this have to do with your offer? Marcus asked.
Kozik finished his drink and placed the glass carefully on the bar.
Everything, Marcus Sullivan.
Because in 18 standard months, the galaxy is going to learn what the Drakthari have known for centuries.
That humanity doesn't just fight to win. You fight to survive.
And there is nothing more dangerous in this universe than a species that refuses to accept extinction. The alien stood, his massive frame casting a shadow across the bar. I will be staying at the Desert Rose Inn for the next 3 days.
If you wish to hear my full proposal, you know where to find me.
As Kozik moved toward the door, he paused and looked back at Marcus one final time.
Ask yourself this question, veteran. If your species truly is as weak and primitive as the galaxy believes, why does every major power in this region keep detailed files on human military tactics? Why do their war colleges study battles like Hill 347? And why, despite being outnumbered and outgunned in every conflict, do humans keep winning the battles that matter most?
With that, the Drakthari left Murphy's last stand, his departure creating a vacuum of silence that lasted for several long minutes. When conversation finally resumed, it was in hushed, urgent tones as beings processed what they had just witnessed. Marcus sat alone at the bar, staring into his fresh drink and feeling the weight of destiny settling on his shoulders like a familiar combat pack. For the first time in 10 years, Staff Sergeant Marcus Sullivan began to remember who he used to be. Marcus spent the night in his cramped room above the boarding house, staring at the ceiling and wrestling with memories he had spent years trying to bury. The ancient cooling unit wheezed and rattled in the corner, providing little relief from the oppressive heat that seemed to seep through the adobe walls. Outside, the desert wind howled across the empty streets of Kepler's End, carrying with it the sound of shifting sand and the distant calls of nocturnal scavengers. Sleep eluded him completely. Every time he closed his eyes, he was back on Hill 347, watching Rodriguez scan the horizon with those sharp young eyes that had saved them all for exactly 37 minutes. The kid had spotted the Zephyrian flanking maneuver just in time for Marcus to reposit his squad, turning what should have been a complete slaughter into something resembling a fighting chance. Marcus rolled over and activated the small holographic display built into his cybernetic arm, calling up the after-action report he had memorized years ago. The official record was sanitized, clinical in its description of what the brass had labeled a tactical withdrawal under pressure. It mentioned casualties, ammunition expenditure, and enemy contact duration, but it said nothing about the way Chin had sung lullabies to keep Santos calm during the artillery barrage. It didn't record Rodriguez's nervous laugh or the way Kim had shared her last energy bar with the wounded communications specialist. The report classified the engagement as a limited strategic success, noting that the delay had allowed civilian evacuation procedures to complete. 47 enemy casualties confirmed, 13 friendly casualties with no survivors. Mission parameters achieved within acceptable loss ratios. Acceptable loss ratios. Marcus had always hated that phrase. He shut off the display and sat up on the edge of the narrow bed, running his organic hand through his hair. The room was Spartan kind, containing only the basics: a bed, a small table, a storage locker, and a tiny refresher unit. The walls were bare except for a single framed photograph sitting on the table, showing 13 young soldiers in combat gear, their faces bright with the confidence of the young and untested.
Marcus picked up the photograph and studied those familiar faces. They had been so sure of themselves, so ready to take on the galaxy. The Terran Federation had filled their heads with stories of human ingenuity and determination, promising them that their species' natural adaptability would carry them through any challenge. They had believed it completely, right up until the moment the Zephyrian energy weapons started falling like rain. A soft chiming from his door communicator interrupted his brooding. Marcus frowned and checked the time display, 3:15 in the morning, far too late for casual visitors. The communicator chimed again, more insistently this time. "Who is it?" Marcus called out, his hand instinctively reaching for the drawer where he kept his service pistol before remembering that weapons were locked up at the municipal security office. "My name is Dr. Elena Vasquez," came a woman's voice through the speaker. The accent was clearly Terran, with a crisp pronunciation that suggested core world education. "I need to speak with you about your conversation with the Drakthari." Marcus hesitated, his military paranoia warring with curiosity. "How do you know about that?" "I was in Murphy's saloon tonight, sitting at a corner table." "I heard everything." There was a pause, then, "Mr. Sullivan, I believe what you heard tonight may have been the most important conversation to take place in this sector in the last 50 years. Against his better judgment, Marcus activated the door lock and stepped back as the portal slid open. The woman who entered was perhaps 40 years old, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and intelligent brown eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She wore the kind of practical clothing favored by researchers and academics, dark pants and a light jacket that had seen better days. What caught Marcus's attention immediately was the small Federation Science Division insignia on her collar. "Dr. Vasquez," Marcus said carefully, not offering to shake hands. "What's a Federation scientist doing in a place like Murphy's Last Stand?" Elena closed the door behind her and activated a small device that created a subtle humming sound, indicating some kind of privacy field. "I'm here on what you might call unofficial business. I've been tracking Drakthari activities for the past 18 months. Marcus felt his eyebrows rise. Tracking activities of a species that supposedly revealed itself for the first time tonight? The scientist smiled grimly. "The Drakthari have been revealing themselves selectively for some time now, Mr. Sullivan. Tonight was simply the first public declaration of their existence." She moved to the small chair and gestured, asking permission to sit. Marcus nodded, and she continued. 3 months ago, a Drakthari representative made contact with the Federation Science Council. The meeting was classified at the highest levels, but they shared certain information about galactic history that has completely overturned our understanding of how civilizations develop. Marcus remained standing, his arms crossed as he studied this unexpected visitor. "What kind of information?" Elena reached into her jacket and withdrew a small data pad, which she activated to display a three-dimensional star chart. The holographic image showed the local galactic arm with various colored markers indicating different territorial boundaries. "According to the Drakthari, the pattern we see here is not natural," she explained, highlighting various regions with a stylus. "The territorial distribution of the 3 major civilizations follows mathematical models that are far too precise to have developed through random expansion." Marcus studied the display, his military training helping him recognize the strategic implications of the territorial boundaries. "Someone designed this setup." "Exactly." The Drakthari claim that they have been subtly influencing galactic development for millennia, guiding younger species toward specific evolutionary and technological paths. They call it the Great Experiment. The former Marine felt a chill run down his spine. An experiment to what end? Elena manipulated the display, showing historical expansion patterns over the past 1,000 years. To determine which species possesses the characteristics necessary for long-term galactic stability. The Drakthari have been conducting a form of artificial selection on a cosmic scale. Marcus sank into the bed, the implications hitting him like a physical blow. They've been playing God with entire civilizations. The Zephyrians were encouraged to develop their militaristic expansion doctrine, Elena continued, her voice taking on the clinical tone of an academic lecture. The Kethvar were guided toward technological superiority and social stratification. And humanity. Humanity was what? The control group? Elena shook her head. Humanity was the variable they couldn't control. According to the Dracthery representative, humans developed in ways that contradicted all their predictive models. Every time they tried to subtly influence human development, your species adapted in unexpected directions. Marcus felt something that might have been pride stirring in his chest, quickly followed by anger. So we're the lab rats that wouldn't follow the maze properly. You're the only species that proved the experiment was flawed, Elena corrected. The Dracthery have been forced to conclude that true evolutionary success cannot be artificially directed. It must emerge naturally from the complex interaction of environment, challenge, and individual choice. The scientist stood and began pacing the small room, her excitement evident despite her professional demeanor. Don't you understand what this means, Mr. Sullivan? Every other major civilization in the galaxy has been following a script written by an elder race. Their technological development, their social structures, their military doctrines, all of it has been subtly influenced to follow predetermined paths. Marcus felt the pieces clicking into place in his mind. But, not humans. We developed naturally. Exactly. And, the result is a species that displays a combination of traits that the Dracthery find both fascinating and terrifying. Humans show individual initiative comparable to the most successful predator species, combined with pack loyalty that exceeds even hive-mind civilizations. Elena returned to her chair and leaned forward intensely. The Dracthery representative called humanity chaos incarnate wrapped in honor and tied with stubbornness. He said that human military tactics appear completely insane to any logical analysis, yet somehow achieve victory against numerically and technologically superior forces. Marcus thought about Hill 347, about the decision to hold a position that any rational commander would have abandoned immediately. Because we don't fight logically. We fight emotionally. You fight with your hearts instead of your processors, Elena agreed. And, according to the Dracthery, that makes you the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Every other civilization can be predicted, their responses calculated and their strategies anticipated. But humans? You're completely unpredictable. The former Marine stood and moved to the small window, looking out at the desert landscape bathed in starlight. If this is all true, if we're really some kind of uncontrolled variable in their grand experiment, why are they revealing themselves now? What changed? Elena's expression grew grim. The experiment is ending, Mr. Sullivan. The Dracthery have determined that the current galactic status quo is unsustainable. Population pressures, resource depletion, and territorial competition are creating conditions that will inevitably lead to total war within the next 5 years. Marcus turned back to face her. The galaxy-spanning conflict that Kozik mentioned. The same conflict that the Dracthery believe will result in the extinction of at least 2 of the 3 major civilizations. They've run the projections thousands of times, modeling every possible scenario. In 93% of the simulations, humanity is completely wiped out. The weight of that statement settled over the small room like a suffocating blanket. Marcus had survived the Proxima conflict, had seen firsthand what modern warfare could do to human soldiers, but the idea of species-wide extinction was almost beyond comprehension. And, in the other 7%? Marcus asked quietly. Elena smiled, and, for the first time since entering the room, she looked genuinely hopeful. In the other 7%, humanity not only survives but emerges as the dominant power in the galaxy. The Dracthery have identified specific historical inflection points where human interventions changed the outcome of their simulations. She reactivated her datapad and showed Marcus a complex timeline filled with battle designations and casualty figures. Every major engagement where humans have fought against overwhelming odds and somehow achieved victory. The Battle of New Thermopylae, where 200 human Marines held off a Kethvar invasion fleet long enough for reinforcements to arrive. The Siege of Vega Station, where a human engineering team found a way to turn a collapsing space habitat into a weapon against Zephyrian attackers. Marcus recognized some of the battles from military history courses, engagements that had been studied and analyzed by tactical experts across the galaxy. You're talking about statistical outliers, impossible victories that shouldn't have happened. I'm talking about a pattern that the Drakthari have been tracking for 50 years, Elena replied. A pattern that suggests humanity possesses some fundamental characteristic that allows them to achieve victory under conditions where any other species would fail. The scientist stood and moved to stand beside Marcus at the window. The Drakthari call it the human factor, and they believe it represents the key to long-term galactic stability. A species that can adapt to any challenge, that refuses to accept defeat even when facing impossible odds. Marcus thought about his conversation with Kozik, about the alien's strange mixture of respect and fascination when discussing human military capabilities. So they want to back the winning horse. They want to back the only horse that has a chance of bringing peace to the galaxy, Elena corrected. According to their models, human dominance would result in a stable, multi-species civilization based on merit and achievement rather than technological superiority or military conquest. The former Marine felt a bitter laugh escape his lips. Peace through superior firepower. It's an old human concept. Peace through superior adaptability, Elena said seriously. The Drakthari believe that human leadership would create a galactic civilization that could respond effectively to any future challenges, whether they come from within the galaxy or beyond it. Marcus turned to study the scientist's face, looking for any sign of deception or manipulation. Dr. Vasquez, why are you telling me this? If this information is classified at the highest levels, sharing it with a washed-up ex-Marine could end your career. Elena was quiet for a long moment, her gaze fixed on the distant stars visible through the window. Because the official Federation response to the Drakthari proposal has been to classify it as a potential threat and restrict access to the information. The Science Council is afraid that public knowledge of the Great Experiment would cause panic and social upheaval. She turned to face Marcus directly. But, I believe that knowledge is power, Mr. Sullivan. And, right now, humanity needs all the power it can get. If the Drakthari are right about the coming conflict, then every human needs to understand what's at stake. Marcus felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders, the same feeling he had experienced when accepting command of his squad all those years ago. What exactly are you asking me to do, Doctor? Elena reached into her jacket again and withdrew a small data crystal, which she held out to Marcus. The Drakthari representative provided the Federation with detailed information about their observations of human military capabilities. Battle analyses, psychological profiles, technological assessments, everything they've learned about our species over the past century. Marcus took the crystal, noting how light it felt despite the weight of the information it contained. And I want you to review that information and, then, decide whether you believe the Drakthari offer is genuine. If you think they're telling the truth about humanity's potential, then, I want you to help me ensure that this knowledge reaches the right people. The scientist moved toward the door, then, paused and looked back. Mr. Sullivan, I've read your military records. I know what happened on Hill 347, and I know what you've been doing for the past 10 years. You're not just a washed-up ex-Marine. You're a man who has seen the worst that war can offer and somehow maintained his humanity. Elena activated the door controls and stepped into the hallway. The galaxy is going to need leaders who understand both the cost of war and the price of peace. The Drakthari may have chosen you for reasons you don't yet understand. After she left, Marcus stood alone in his room, holding the data crystal and feeling the weight of destiny pressing down on him. Outside, the desert wind continued to howl, carrying with it the scent of change and the promise of storms on the horizon. For the first time in 10 years, Staff Sergeant Marcus Sullivan began to consider the possibility that his war was not yet over. Marcus spent the entire next day reviewing the contents of Elena's data crystal, and, with each passing hour, his understanding of humanity's place in the galaxy underwent a fundamental transformation. The information contained within the small device painted a picture of human capabilities that was both inspiring and terrifying, a species-wide psychological profile that explained why every other civilization found human behavior so difficult to predict. The Drakthari had been remarkably thorough in their observations. The data crystal contained detailed analyses of over 300 human military engagements spanning the past century, from the first colonial skirmishes to major fleet actions during the Proxima conflict. Each battle was broken down into component factors: terrain, weather, equipment ratios, tactical doctrine, leadership decisions, and individual soldier behavior under extreme stress.
What emerged from the analysis was a pattern that Marcus had never fully recognized, despite living it firsthand.
Human military success was not based on superior technology or numerical advantage.
Instead, it stemmed from a unique combination of individual creativity and collective determination that allowed human forces to adapt and overcome challenges that would cripple more rigid military organizations. The Battle of Kepler 186F provided a perfect example. A human garrison of 57 soldiers had held off a Zephyrian assault force of over 400 for 6 days, using improvised tactics that violated every principle of defensive warfare. Instead of consolidating their forces in a fortified position, the humans had broken into small teams that conducted continuous hit-and-run attacks, never allowing the Zephyrians to establish a stable assault formation. According to the Drach theory analysis, the human tactics should have resulted in complete annihilation within hours. Individual squads operating independently against a coordinated enemy force represented the exact opposite of sound military doctrine. Yet somehow, the constant harassment and unpredictable attacks had so disrupted Zephyrian command structure that the invasion force eventually withdrew, claiming the planet was tactically unsuitable for occupation. Marcus found similar patterns in engagement after engagement. Humans seemed to possess an almost supernatural ability to function effectively when their command structure was compromised, with individual soldiers and small units making tactical decisions that somehow supported overall strategic objectives despite having no communication with higher command.
The psychological profiles were even more revealing.
The Drach theory had identified several key characteristics that set humanity apart from other species. The first was what they termed adaptive problem solving, the human tendency to view every obstacle as a puzzle to be solved rather than an insurmountable barrier. Where other species would retreat when faced with superior opposition, humans would look for alternative approaches, unconventional tactics, or environmental factors that could be exploited. The second characteristic was tribal loyalty scaling, the human ability to extend family-level emotional bonds to larger and larger groups. Unlike hive mind species that were born with collective consciousness, or hierarchical species that followed rigid social structures, humans could choose to treat complete strangers as brothers and sisters worth dying for. The third and most important characteristic was something the Drach theory called existential stubbornness, the human refusal to accept extinction even when facing impossible odds. Other species would surrender or retreat when survival became mathematically impossible, but humans seemed to possess some fundamental inability to acknowledge defeat until they were literally dead. Marcus thought about his own experience on Hill 347, remembering the moment when he realized his squad was completely surrounded with no hope of rescue. The logical response would have been to surrender, to save the lives of his soldiers and live to fight another day. Instead, his first instinct had been to find the best defensive position and make the enemy pay as dearly as possible for every inch of ground. The data crystal also contained extensive recordings of human soldiers under combat stress, and Marcus found himself watching helmet camera footage from battles he had never heard of. In engagement after engagement, he saw the same pattern, human soldiers making impossible decisions under extreme pressure, somehow finding ways to achieve victory when any rational analysis would predict failure. One recording showed a human medic treating wounded soldiers while under heavy fire, completely ignoring the energy bolts that were destroying cover all around her position. When her medical supplies ran out, she began improvising treatments using materials scavenged from the battlefield, somehow keeping her patients alive until evacuation arrived 3 hours later. Another showed a human engineer solving a critical power distribution problem while his space station was under attack, working frantically to reroute energy systems even as explosions shook the entire structure. When enemy boarding parties reached his section, he continued working while fighting off attackers with a maintenance tool, ultimately completing his task seconds before being overwhelmed. The Drach theory commentary accompanying these recordings was both analytical and admiring. They noted that human soldiers seemed to operate on multiple levels simultaneously, maintaining individual initiative while supporting collective objectives, processing emotional responses while making rational tactical decisions, and accepting personal sacrifice while fighting desperately to survive. By the time Marcus finished reviewing the data, the twin suns of Kepler's end were setting, painting the desert landscape in shades of orange and red. He sat in his small room surrounded by holographic displays showing battle statistics, psychological profiles, and strategic assessments, feeling overwhelmed by the weight of what he had learned. A soft knock at his door interrupted his brooding. Marcus shut down the data displays and answered the summons, finding himself face to face with an unfamiliar young man in civilian clothing.
Staff Sergeant Sullivan, the visitor asked.
My name is Lieutenant David Park, Terran Federation Intelligence.
I believe you've been expecting me.
Marcus stepped aside to allow the intelligence officer to enter, noting the man's nervous demeanor and the way his eyes constantly scanned for potential threats. Park was perhaps 30 years old, with the pale complexion of someone who spent most of his time in climate-controlled environments. His civilian clothes were expensive but not flashy, the kind of outfit designed to help someone blend into any crowd. I wasn't expecting anyone, Lieutenant, Marcus replied carefully.
What can I do for Federation intelligence?
Park activated a privacy field similar to the one Elena had used, then turned to face Marcus with an expression of barely controlled anxiety. Sir, I've been monitoring communications from this sector for the past 48 hours. We know about your contact with the Dractheri representative, and we know that Dr. Vasquez provided you with classified information. Marcus felt his defensive instincts engage, his body automatically shifting into a ready stance despite the civilian clothes and peaceful setting.
And my superiors want to know what the alien offered you.
Park's voice carried the slightly desperate tone of a junior officer who had been given an impossible assignment. Sir, the implications of first contact with an elder race are staggering.
If the Dractheri possess the technological and strategic capabilities they claim, this could represent either humanity's greatest opportunity or its greatest threat. The former Marine studied the intelligence officer for a long moment, trying to determine whether Park was genuinely concerned about humanity's welfare or simply following orders from paranoid bureaucrats. What does Federation intelligence think the Dractheri want?
Park reached into his jacket and withdrew his own data pad, which he activated to show a star chart similar to the one Elena had displayed.
Our analysis suggests three possibilities. First, that they're telling the truth about wanting to help humanity achieve galactic dominance. Second, that they're working with one of the other major civilizations to eliminate human influence in this sector. Third, that they represent some kind of galactic authority seeking to impose order on the younger species. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. And which possibility does intelligence favor? Honestly, sir? We don't know. The Dractheri have revealed so little about themselves that we're essentially working blind. Park's professional composure slipped slightly, revealing the frustration beneath. What we do know is that several other Dractheri representatives have made contact with high-ranking officials in both the Zephyrian Empire and the Kethvar Collective. This was new information, and Marcus felt his analytical mind engaging despite his instinctive distrust of intelligence operatives. The same offer? Unknown, but probably not.
Our xenopsychology experts believe that any species capable of influencing galactic development over millennia would be sophisticated enough to tailor their approach to different civilizations. Park manipulated his display to show intelligence estimates of Dractheri contact patterns.
What concerns my superiors is the timing. Why reveal themselves now? Why make contact with all three major civilizations simultaneously? If they really wanted to help humanity, why not approach us exclusively?
Marcus thought about his conversation with Kozik, remembering the aliens' casual mention of the coming galactic war.
Maybe because they know something we don't about what's coming. The intelligence officer's expression grew grim.
That's what we're afraid of, sir. Our strategic analysts have been modeling long-term stability in this sector, and the results are disturbing. Population growth, resource competition, and territorial pressure are creating conditions that could lead to major conflict within the next decade. Marcus felt pieces of the puzzle clicking into place.
A conflict that the Dractheri want to influence or control, Park suggested.
Sir, I need to know what the alien offered you. Not just the general outline, but the specific details.
My superiors believe that understanding the Dractheri proposal could be critical to Federation security.
The former Marine was quiet for a long moment, weighing his options. His military training told him to cooperate with legitimate authority, but his experience with bureaucratic politics made him wary of sharing sensitive information with intelligence operatives. Finally, he made his decision. The Dractheri representative suggested that humanity has unique characteristics that make us ideally suited for galactic leadership, Marcus said carefully. He indicated that his people have been studying human military capabilities and believe we could emerge victorious from the coming conflict. Park leaned forward intently. Did he offer specific assistance? Technology, intelligence, military support? Marcus shook his head. Nothing concrete. He suggested that there would be more detailed discussions if I was interested in hearing their full proposal. And, are you? Interested, I mean. The question hung in the air between them, and Marcus realized that his answer would determine not just his own future, but possibly the fate of humanity itself. If he pursued the Dractheri offer, he would be committing to a path that could lead to species-wide dominance or total extinction. If he walked away, humanity might lose its only chance to avoid annihilation in the coming galactic war. Lieutenant, Marcus said slowly, what do you think would happen if the Federation tried to prohibit contact with the Dractheri? Park's expression suggested he had already considered this scenario. Honestly? I think it would be impossible to enforce. If the Dractheri have been operating undetected for millennia, they obviously possess capabilities that exceed our ability to monitor or control them. The intelligence officer stood and moved to the window, looking out at the desert landscape. Sir, my personal opinion is that humanity is facing a critical decision point. We can try to maintain the status quo and hope that the coming conflict doesn't destroy us, or we can take a calculated risk and explore what the Dractheri are offering. Marcus joined Park at the window, both men staring out at the alien stars that had become humanity's new frontier. What does Federation Command think? Officially? They want more information before making any decisions. Unofficially? They're scared, sir. The idea that some elder race has been manipulating galactic development challenges every assumption about human independence and achievement. Park turned to face Marcus directly. But there's something else, sir. Something that the official intelligence briefings don't mention. Marcus felt his eyebrows rise. Which is? Our deep space monitoring stations have been detecting unusual energy signatures at the edge of the galaxy for the past 6 months. Massive movements of ships or stations, but using technology that doesn't match any known civilization. The implications hit Marcus immediately. Someone else is coming. Or something else. Sir, if the Dractheri are right about the coming galactic war, and if there are external threats that we don't even know about yet, then humanity might need all the help it can get. The intelligence officer moved toward the door, then paused. Staff Sergeant, I know that asking you to take this meeting puts enormous responsibility on your shoulders. But right now, you might be humanity's best hope for understanding what we're really facing. After Park left, Marcus stood alone in his room as darkness fell over Kepler's end. The weight of decision pressed down on him like the gravity of a dying star. Tomorrow, he would have to choose between the safety of obscurity and the terrible responsibility of determining humanity's future. Outside his window, the alien constellations wheeled overhead, their ancient light carrying messages from civilizations that had risen and fallen long before humans ever looked up at the stars. Somewhere among those distant suns, forces were gathering that would reshape the galaxy forever. Marcus thought about his fallen comrades, about Rodriguez's sharp eyes and Chen's gentle songs and Santos's nervous laughter. They had died believing in humanity's potential, trusting that their sacrifice would help their species reach for something greater than mere survival. As he prepared for sleep, Marcus made his decision. Tomorrow, he would visit the Desert Rose Inn and hear what the Dractheri had to offer. Not because he trusted aliens with godlike powers, but because he trusted in the same human stubbornness that had carried 13 soldiers through 18 impossible hours on a forgotten hill. The galaxy was about to discover what Staff Sergeant Marcus Sullivan and every other human already knew, that sometimes, the only way forward was through the fire. The Desert Rose Inn stood at the edge of Kepler's End like a monument to faded dreams, its ornate facade a stark contrast to the utilitarian structures that dominated the rest of the settlement. Built during the early colonial period when optimistic settlers had believed the planet would become a major trade hub, the inn now served as a reminder of how quickly galactic economics could shift. Its elaborate gardens had long since given way to native desert plants, and its decorative fountains contained only sand and the occasional small lizard. Marcus approached the building in the early morning light, the twin suns casting long shadows across the empty street. He had spent the night wrestling with his decision, alternating between certainty and doubt as he considered the implications of what he was about to do. By accepting the Dractheri offer to hear their full proposal, he was potentially committing not just himself, but his entire species to a path that could lead to either galactic dominance or complete extinction. The lobby of the Desert Rose retained traces of its former elegance, with faded tapestries depicting scenes from ancient Earth and furniture that had been crafted with care during an era when aesthetics mattered more than pure functionality. A single desk clerk, an elderly Terran woman with silver hair and tired eyes, looked up as Marcus entered. "I'm looking for the guest registered under the name Kozik," Marcus said, noting how the woman's expression immediately shifted from professional courtesy to nervous apprehension. "Room 237, she replied quickly, then added in a lower voice, "Sir, that guest requested that any visitors be directed to the private dining room on the second floor instead of his quarters." Marcus nodded and made his way to the ancient elevator, its brass fixtures polished to a gleam despite the building's general state of decline. As the elevator climbed slowly upward, he found himself thinking about the weight of the moment. How many pivotal decisions in human history had been made in similar circumstances? How many crucial conversations had taken place in unremarkable rooms in forgotten places? The private dining room was larger than Marcus had expected, with tall windows that provided a panoramic view of the desert landscape. The furniture was clearly designed for beings much larger than humans, with reinforced chairs and a table that could have accommodated a small conference. At the far end of the room, Kozik stood with his back to the door, his massive frame silhouetted against the morning light streaming through the windows. "Staff Sergeant Marcus Sullivan," the Dractheri said without turning around. "I confess that I was uncertain whether you would accept our invitation." Marcus closed the door behind him and moved into the room, his military training automatically assessing potential exits and defensive positions. "I'm here to listen. That doesn't mean I'm ready to commit to anything." Kozik turned to face him, those amber eyes studying Marcus with the same unsettling intensity he remembered from their first meeting. "Caution is wise, particularly when dealing with powers beyond your current understanding. Please, take a seat. We have much to discuss." The alien moved to the head of the table with fluid grace, settling into a chair that had clearly been modified to accommodate his unique physiology. Marcus took a position halfway down the table, close enough for conversation but far enough to maintain some sense of personal space. "Before we begin," Kozik said, "I must ask whether you have shared the details of our previous conversation with any representatives of your government." Marcus considered lying, then decided that honesty was probably the safer course when dealing with beings who had been observing humanity for millennia. "Federation intelligence approached me yesterday. I told them that you had made contact and suggested a future conversation, but I didn't provide any specific details about your proposal." The Dractheri nodded approvingly. "Discretion serves both our interests at this point. What I am about to share with you will fundamentally alter your understanding of galactic politics and humanity's place within the larger cosmic order. Once you possess this knowledge, you will face choices that will affect not just your own fate, but the ultimate destiny of your species." Kozik reached into what Marcus now realized was some kind of dimensional storage device, withdrawing a crystalline object that pulsed with soft, blue light. As the alien activated the device, the air above the table shimmered and resolved into a three-dimensional star map showing the entire galaxy. "What you see here is the galaxy as it exists today," Kozik explained, manipulating the display to highlight different regions. 3 major civilizations, dozens of minor species, and vast areas of unexplored space. To most beings, this appears to represent the natural order of cosmic development. The display shifted, showing the same region of space but with different markings and boundaries. This is how the galaxy appeared 1,000 years ago. Notice the distribution of territories and the relationship between different species. Marcus studied the historical map, noting significant differences in territorial boundaries and the presence of several civilizations that no longer existed. What happened to the missing species? Some achieved transcendence and departed for other dimensions. Others succumbed to internal conflicts or environmental catastrophes. A few were absorbed by larger civilizations through conquest or assimilation. Kozik's voice carried a note of sadness that surprised Marcus. "The galaxy is a harsh environment, Staff Sergeant. Survival is never guaranteed, even for species that achieve interstellar travel. The display shifted again, this time showing projected future scenarios. These are the probable configurations of galactic power 50 years from now, based on current trends and historical patterns. Marcus felt his blood grow cold as he studied the projections.
In the most optimistic scenarios, humanity controlled perhaps 10% of its current territory. In the worst cases, the Terran Federation had been completely eliminated, its former worlds divided between the Zephyrian Empire and the Kethvar Collective.
In 93% of our simulations, Kozik continued, the coming conflict results in human extinction. Your species possesses remarkable individual capabilities, but you lack the technological infrastructure and numerical superiority necessary to compete with more established civilizations. The alien paused the display and leaned forward slightly. However, our analysis has identified several factors that could dramatically alter these projections. The question is whether humanity possesses the wisdom and courage necessary to embrace those factors. Marcus forced himself to focus on the strategic implications rather than the emotional impact of seeing his species' potential extinction mapped out in mathematical detail. What factors? Kozik activated a different section of the crystalline device, and the holographic display now showed detailed schematics of various technologies. Marcus recognized some as human designs, while others were clearly of alien origin.
The first factor is technological acceleration.
The Dractheri possess advances in energy generation, materials science, and information processing that could revolutionize human capabilities within a matter of decades rather than centuries. Marcus studied the schematics, noting propulsion systems that appeared to manipulate spacetime directly and defensive technologies that could render conventional weapons obsolete.
What would you want in exchange for this technology?
Partnership, not submission, Kozik replied. The Dractheri seek to guide and advise, but we do not wish to rule. Our experience suggests that civilizations achieve their greatest potential when they maintain independence while receiving strategic support. The display shifted to show tactical analyses of human military capabilities.
The second factor is strategic enhancement.
Human military doctrine possesses unique advantages that could be amplified through better intelligence, coordination, and resource allocation. Marcus found himself looking at battle plans that seemed to take human tactical preferences into account while adding layers of strategic sophistication that current Federation command structure couldn't provide. You're talking about turning humanity into your proxy army, Marcus said bluntly.
Kozik's amber eyes seemed to glow brighter.
I am talking about turning humanity into the stabilizing force that this galaxy desperately needs. Your species possesses a combination of adaptability, loyalty, and determination that makes you ideally suited for leadership roles. The alien stood and moved to the windows, his massive frame casting shadows across the holographic displays. The third factor is the most important, and the most dangerous.
It involves revealing the true nature of the threat that the galaxy will face in the near future. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine.
What threat? The energy signatures that your Federation monitoring stations have detected at the edge of the galaxy represent advanced scouts from a civilization that exists beyond the galactic rim.
We call them the Devourers, though their actual name is unpronounceable in most languages. Kozik returned to the table and activated a new section of the crystalline device.
The holographic display now showed images that made Marcus's stomach turn, massive biomechanical ships that seemed to be part machine and part living organism, worlds stripped of all organic matter, and star systems left as empty husks of their former selves. The Devourers expand through consumption, literally absorbing the biological and technological resources of entire civilizations to fuel their own growth. They have been moving through the outer galactic clusters for the past millennium, leaving nothing but dead space in their wake. Marcus stared at the horrific images, his military mind automatically assessing the tactical implications.
How long before they reach inhabited space?
Our projections suggest first contact within 8 to 10 years, with major incursions beginning within 15 years. The advanced scouts are already probing our outer defenses, testing the capabilities of local species. The alien manipulated the display to show invasion routes and timing estimates. If the current galactic civilizations continue their internal conflicts, they will be utterly unprepared for the Devourer assault.
Divided, they will fall one by one.
United under effective leadership, they might have a chance to survive. Marcus felt the weight of cosmic responsibility settling on his shoulders like a lead blanket. And, you believe humanity could provide that leadership? We believe humanity represents the only hope for galactic survival, Kozik replied with absolute conviction. Every other species we have studied follows predictable patterns of behavior. The Zephyrians will fight bravely but rigidly. The Kethvar will develop sophisticated defenses but lack the adaptability to respond to unexpected threats. The Drakthari leaned forward, his voice taking on an almost hypnotic quality. Humans alone possess the combination of tactical creativity, strategic thinking, and absolute refusal to surrender that will be necessary to defeat the Devourers. Your species has repeatedly achieved impossible victories through sheer determination and innovative thinking. Marcus thought about Hill 347, about 13 soldiers holding off a battalion through pure stubbornness and creative tactical thinking. If the Drakthari were right, that same human characteristics might be the galaxy's only hope against a threat that could destroy entire civilizations.
What exactly are you proposing? Marcus asked.
Kozik reactivated the star map, this time showing human territory expanded across vast regions of space. A staged program of technological enhancement and strategic positioning that would allow humanity to assume a leadership role in galactic affairs. Within 20 years, the Terran Federation could become the dominant military and political force in the galaxy. The display showed fleets of human vessels equipped with Drakthari technology, human colonies established in strategic locations throughout the galaxy, and defense networks that could respond to threats from any direction. The first phase would involve providing your species with selected technological advances, particularly in the areas of propulsion, energy generation, and defensive systems.
This would allow rapid expansion of human territory and influence.
Marcus studied the expansion plans, noting how they position human forces at key strategic choke points throughout the galaxy.
And the other civilizations would just accept human dominance?
The other civilizations would accept human protection in exchange for technological cooperation and resource sharing, Kozik replied.
The Drakthari would serve as mediators and advisors, helping to establish frameworks for peaceful coexistence under human leadership.
The alien paused the display and fixed Marcus with that unsettling stare. Staff Sergeant, the choice before you is simple but profound. Humanity can continue on its current path and face certain extinction within the next 2 decades. Or your species can accept our partnership and emerge as the guardians of galactic civilization. Marcus felt overwhelmed by the scope of what was being offered. Galactic dominance for humanity, advanced technology beyond current imagination, and the chance to save not just his own species but every intelligent life form in the galaxy. The offer was so grand, so impossible, that part of him wondered if this was all some elaborate delusion.
Why me? Marcus asked. If you're offering to make humanity the dominant species in the galaxy, why approach a washed-up ex-Marine instead of Federation Command or the planetary governments?
Kozik's smile was genuinely amused. Because Federation Command and the planetary governments would spend years debating the political implications while the galaxy burns around them. Because they would demand committees and feasibility studies and risk assessments while the Devourers prepare their assault. The alien stood and moved around the table until he was standing directly behind Marcus's chair. But, most importantly, because you understand the true cost of leadership. You have seen what happens when good people make hard choices under impossible circumstances. You know that sometimes, the only way to save lives is to risk everything. Marcus felt the truth of those words resonating in his chest. Hill 347 had taught him that leadership wasn't about making safe choices or following established procedures. It was about accepting responsibility for outcomes that were beyond any individual's control and making the best decisions possible with incomplete information.
If I agree to this, Marcus said slowly, what would be my role?
You would serve as the primary liaison between humanity and the Drakthari, Kozik replied. You would help guide the technological transfer process and assist in developing strategic plans for galactic defense. Most importantly, you would help select and train the human leaders who will command the forces that stand between the galaxy and complete annihilation. The alien returned to his seat and deactivated the holographic displays, leaving them alone in the silent room with only the morning sunlight streaming through the windows.
Staff Sergeant Marcus Sullivan, Kozik said formally, the Drakthari offer you the chance to transform humanity from a minor galactic power into the saviors of civilized space. Will you accept this responsibility? Marcus looked out at the desert landscape, thinking about Rodriguez and Chen and Santos and all the other soldiers who had died believing that humanity could be something greater than it was. The choice before him was terrifying in its scope, but, for the first time in 10 years, he felt like he had a chance to honor their sacrifice. The galaxy was waiting for his answer. Marcus stared out at the endless expanse of desert, watching the twin suns climb higher into the alien sky as he wrestled with a decision that could reshape the galaxy. The weight of cosmic responsibility pressed down on him with the intensity of a collapsing star, yet beneath that crushing burden, he felt something stirring that he hadn't experienced in 10 years, hope. I need guarantees, Marcus said finally, turning back to face Kozik. If I'm going to commit humanity to this path, I need to know that the Drakthari will honor their commitments even when the situation becomes difficult. The massive alien tilted his head in what Marcus was beginning to recognize as a gesture of approval. What guarantees would satisfy your concerns? Marcus stood and began pacing the room, his military mind working through the strategic implications of what was being proposed. First, technology transfer has to be genuine and complete. No hidden restrictions, no planned obsolescence, no secret kill switches. If you're giving us advanced propulsion systems, we get the full technical specifications and the ability to modify and improve them ourselves. Kozik nodded slowly. Acceptable. The Drakthari have learned that partial knowledge often creates more problems than it solves. Second, human autonomy must be maintained. You can advise and suggest, but all final decisions regarding human military and political actions remain under human control. No puppet strings, no manipulation through technological dependency. The alien's amber eyes seemed to glow brighter. Also acceptable, though we reserve the right to withdraw our support if humanity makes choices that threaten galactic stability. Marcus paused in his pacing, considering the implications of that caveat. Define threaten galactic stability. Actions that would result in the extinction of major civilizations or that would leave the galaxy vulnerable to devour or assault, Kozik replied without hesitation. The Drakthari will not enable genocide, nor will we support strategies that prioritize short-term human advantage over long-term galactic survival. The former Marine found himself impressed by the alien's directness. At least Kozik was being honest about the limits of the proposed partnership. Third, Marcus continued, I want full disclosure about the Drakthari. Your capabilities, your numbers, your long-term objectives. If we're going to be partners, we need to understand what we're partnering with. For the first time since their conversation began, Kozik seemed hesitant. The alien was quiet for several long moments, his massive frame motionless as he considered Marcus's demand. That information could be disturbing to human sensibilities, Kozik said finally. The Drakthari have existed for millions of years, Staff Sergeant. Our perspective on existence and the meaning of individual life differs significantly from yours. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine, but pressed forward anyway. I need to know. Kozik reactivated the crystalline device, and the air above the table filled with new holographic images. What Marcus saw defied easy comprehension: vast structures that seemed to exist partially outside normal spacetime, beings of pure energy that could assume physical form at will, and technologies that manipulated the fundamental forces of reality itself. The Drakthari are not bound by the physical limitations that constrain younger species, Kozik explained, his voice taking on an almost reverential tone. We have transcended the need for fixed physical forms, for planetary habitation, for linear temporal existence. What you see before you is merely one possible manifestation of what I am. The holographic images shifted to show the true scope of Drakthari presence in the galaxy. They were everywhere and nowhere, existing as pure consciousness that could interact with physical reality when necessary, but spending most of their existence in dimensions that human science could barely theorize about. We number in the billions, but we also number as one. Individual identity exists but is subordinate to collective purpose. We have guided the development of thousands of civilizations across multiple galaxies, always seeking to nurture the emergence of species capable of achieving true transcendence. Marcus felt his worldview crumbling and reforming as he processed this information.
The beings he was negotiating with weren't just advanced aliens, they were practically gods by any human measure.
"Why don't you just stop the devourers yourselves?" Marcus asked. "If you have these kinds of capabilities, why do you need human help?"
Kozik's expression grew sad, and, for a moment, Marcus glimpsed something ancient and weary in those amber eyes.
"Because direct intervention violates the fundamental principle that governs our existence.
Transcendent species must not impose their will upon younger civilizations, even to save them. Growth and achievement must come from within, or they have no meaning."
The alien gestured to the holographic displays showing human military achievements. "The devourers represent a test that every galaxy must eventually face. Most fail, and their civilizations are consumed.
But, occasionally, a species emerges that possesses the qualities necessary not just to survive, but to protect others."
Marcus understood now why the Drakthari had been so fascinated by human military behavior.
They weren't just studying tactical capabilities, they were evaluating humanity's potential to become something greater. "You're looking for a successor," Marcus realized. "A species that can eventually transcend physical existence but chooses to remain engaged with the material universe."
Kozik's smile was genuinely warm. "The galaxy needs guardians, Staff Sergeant.
Beings who possess both the power to protect and the wisdom to know when not to intervene. Humanity shows the potential to become such guardians." The weight of that revelation settled over Marcus like a shroud. The Drakthari weren't just offering humanity galactic dominance, they were offering the chance to become something unprecedented in cosmic history.
"And if humanity fails?" Marcus asked. "If we can't defeat the devourers or if we abuse the power you're offering?"
"Then, the galaxy dies, and the Drakthari withdraw to other dimensions to await the next cosmic cycle," Kozik replied with matter-of-fact finality.
"This is not the first galaxy we have tried to nurture, Staff Sergeant. It may not be the last."
The casual way the alien spoke about the extinction of billions of sentient beings should have been horrifying, but Marcus found himself understanding the cosmic perspective that made such detachment necessary. When you existed on a timescale measured in millions of years, individual civilizations became data points in a larger experiment. "I need time to think," Marcus said, feeling suddenly exhausted by the magnitude of what was being discussed. Kozik deactivated the holographic displays and stood, his massive frame moving with fluid grace.
"Time is the one resource we cannot provide in abundance, Staff Sergeant.
The devourers will not wait for humanity to reach a convenient decision point." The alien moved toward the door, then paused and looked back.
"I will remain on Kepler's end for one more day.
After that, I must report to my collective whether humanity is ready to accept its destiny or if we must seek alternative solutions." Marcus felt his blood grow cold.
"Alternative solutions?"
The Kethvar possess significant technological capabilities and a highly organized social structure. The Zephyrians have proven military effectiveness and the numbers necessary for large-scale operations.
Either species could potentially be enhanced to serve as galactic defenders, though neither possesses humanity's unique combination of traits.
The implication was clear: humanity was the Drakthari's first choice, but not their only option. If humans proved unwilling or unable to accept the offered partnership, the alien collective would simply move on to the next candidate species. After Kozik left, Marcus remained alone in the dining room for several hours, staring out at the desert landscape while his mind worked through the implications of everything he had learned. The choice before him was staggering in its scope: accept the Drakthari offer and potentially transform humanity into the dominant force in the galaxy, or decline and watch his species face certain extinction within the next 2 decades. But, as he considered the decision, Marcus found himself thinking not about grand cosmic destinies, but about 13 young soldiers who had held an impossible position because they believed it was the right thing to do. Rodriguez with her sharp eyes and nervous laugh.
Chen singing lullabies during an artillery barrage.
Santos sharing her last energy bar with a wounded comrade. They had all died believing that humanity could be something better than it was. They had sacrificed their lives not for glory or conquest, but because they believed their species was worth protecting. Now Marcus had the chance to honor that sacrifice by giving humanity the tools it needed to survive and protect others. As the afternoon wore on, Marcus's decision crystallized with the clarity that comes from accepting an impossible responsibility. He would accept the Drakthari offer, not because he trusted alien beings with godlike powers, but because he trusted in the same human stubbornness that had carried 13 soldiers through 18 impossible hours. That evening, Marcus returned to Murphy's last stand and found the establishment unusually